This is The Weekly Set, an official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com.
I wish I was the monster you think I am.
You have come here to beseech me?
Can't ask for your soul.
Madness can be a medicine for the modern world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today, on May 3rd, 2021, we are recording episode 300 of the podcast. This is our series finale. We will be coming back with another podcast in over a month, sometime around there. We haven't really set a firm date yet for the return. But if you're already subscribed to the RSS feed through a podcast client, or if you get these on YouTube, they're going to be in the same place. Just it's going to have a different name for the podcast and a different format. Little things going to be a little bit different, but you'll be able to find it in the same place. But for now, this is our 300th episode of The Weekly Set and the final episode of The Weekly Set as it is now. So we're going to be doing a few kind of little fun things to celebrate the idea of our season finale. We're going to look back at a few.
You mean
things.
our series finale?
Yeah, our series finale. That's true. We're going to go over some of the things that we talked about in our very first episode of the podcast. We're going to reminisce a little bit about that. We're going to talk about our favorite series finales from other TV shows and stuff. So we're going to break down some of those. We even have some, we have a top 10 list of those. But we also have some honorable mentions, and we even have a few guests that are going to be giving theirs as well, that we have coming in through audio. So that'll be fun. Let's get things started. So I don't have an exact date on when we started our podcast, but I know it was in 2015.
Yes.
When we started our podcast, it was right around early 2015. And if you remember, before that, we used to do a roundtable.
We were doing basically a text.
Yeah, it was a text cast.
Yeah, text.
A pod text.
A pod text, I guess.
Basically, what we did is we just hopped on to like we were on Skype, I think, at the time.
And
we would just have a chat, and it would be like, there'd be like four of us or something. We'd have a topic, and we'd just kind of be chatting back and forth through text. And then I would go and kind of edit that down, correct some typos and stuff, make it clean and nice.
And you publish it to the website.
Yeah, and publish it to our website, which at the time was TV Enthusiast. That was the platform we're on. I don't have access to any of that stuff because that website's gone. So that's like, I can't go back and look at some of the stuff we talked about. I think in the first episode, we were talking about Lost, though.
Probably.
We talked about Lost a lot.
We made the decision very, very early on that we were going to do Twin Peaks.
That was in the text ones, yes.
Yeah, that was in the text ones. Yeah, that was one of the first things we did.
Yeah. I think we did for our 10th episode of the actual podcast. I think it was the 10th, or it was another one close therein. We actually ended up doing the Twin Peaks movie at the time, Firewalk with Me.
Yes.
As like our topic, because we had done, most of our text-based podcast or text cast or whatever you'd call them were basically about Twin Peaks. It was about our coverage of Twin Peaks, and we would do like 6 episodes a week. You remember that? Yes,
and that was stressful. I hated that. It's like trying to get through 6 episodes of Twin Peaks in time for every week was stressful.
It's not exactly a light show.
No, it's not.
But yeah, it was fun. We would do that, and then we had kind of our changing kind of cast at the time. We had, I believe when we started, it was you, me, Kat, and Tom.
Yes, Tom.
Were the ones that were kind of on it right from the very first one. And I think Tom left fairly early in. I think he was in for like 1 or 2 of the...
Yeah, he left pretty much like almost as soon as I joined. Like he left.
Yeah, well, you were on the first text podcast or text cast.
Yeah, but like by the second one, yeah, it was like...
Yeah, I think he was already gone at that point.
And it's funny because, like, Tom, he was the one who brought me in.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the one who, like, messaged me on Skype and, asked me if I was interested in doing something with, Enthusiast. And I was like, yeah. and then like as soon as like I got in, I got like situated. It's like he was out.
So then it was you, me, and Kat, and that's what we did for the Twin Peaks stuff. It was the three of us where we covered Twin Peaks. And then sometime after that, before we started the main podcast, Ed joined us.
Yes.
And so we did a few things with him, and we were kind of just doing, I think, more general topics where we were kind of going over, we were talking a lot about like, you know, Marvel Netflix shows and things like that at the time, I think. DC and MCU kind of stuff. But we would cover some other things too, and we just kind of talked more like general chat. And then when we started the first episode of the podcast, Ed had to leave.
Yes.
So he had some other commitments that he had to leave for, and so that was basically Ed left like right before it became a podcast. But we ended up getting him on for a few like specials and stuff, you know, where we did like I think for our 50th episode or our 100th episode, he joined us. So yeah, so we had him back on like a few times for that, for the actual podcast. And yeah, so that brings us to kind of our first actual podcast, like not text one. And I have some kind of some of the things we were talking about there. So you ready for kind of a trip down memory lane to go over the news stories that we've covered then?
Yeah. What was going on in 2015?
Okay, so our first news story was the casting of David Tennant in Jessica Jones.
That's right. Wow. Jessica Jones was still like not even out.
Well, there wasn't even like wasn't even officially called Jessica Jones yet. I don't think we kept calling it AKA Jessica Jones.
Oh, probably, yeah.
But yeah, that was our first news story. So think about that, how long ago that was. This wasn't even talking about the show itself. This is talking about just him being cast in it.
Right, yeah.
And we were all pretty psyched about it, I remember. You were kind of telling us a little bit about the author of that run of Jessica Jones and his involvement in some other things. Like, I think did he do Powers? And he did something else too, I think.
Yeah.
But we were talking about similarities, and you're like, actually, that's the same author. And we were kind of talking about that, and it was pretty fun. We were kind of going over that kind of stuff with Kat, and Kat and I were big Doctor Who fans at the time. So we were like psyched about David Tennant. So
right. Yeah,
that was our first news story. Our second news story, Fox developing an X-Men TV series, even though they didn't have the rights. So
yeah, that's right.
They had to negotiate with Marvel. This is way before, you know, they were bought out by Marvel. But they wanted to do a TV series, but the rights they had was to all the mutant-related stuff. And they also had Fantastic Four was Fox too, right?
That ended up in Legion, and then there was like two. Well,
this
was like
was
another show that happened. Was this the Gifted thing?
Yes, this was the Gifted.
What happened to the other one about like supposed to be about the Hellfire Club?
That just didn't go through.
That never happened, did it? No.
I think they had aspects of that were in the Gifted, some aspects of it.
Right.
But the ones that came out of that deal were the Gifted and Legion. But that was, remember the Gifted. It's crazy to think about now. Now that wouldn't be a negotiation issue because now Disney just owns them.
Oh, yeah.
And then the last news story we covered on our first podcast was Wet Hot American Summer getting a Netflix series.
Yep, and that did happen.
We actually covered that on one of our podcasts, I think. We actually did the first season.
Oh, probably. I don't even remember. I don't even remember watching it.
It was a long time ago. Yeah, they ended up doing two series for Netflix. They did the one that took place like before the movie, and then they did the one that took place like 10 years later. Which I never saw the one that took place 10 years later, but I saw the
that's right,
in the series. But yeah, we watched the movie and the first season and discussed it. Yeah, it was interesting. That's something that I'd always heard about but had never seen. So we just kind of said, hey, we're doing a podcast. This is a show that's coming up. Let's watch the movie and then watch the series. And we kind of all did that. That was fun. Next up, these are the shows we had. Our format at the time is we asked kind of each of us what we were watching. So it was me, you, and Kat. And we said one at a time, what are you watching right now? What's one thing you're watching that you want to talk about? And so in order, my pick was 12 Monkeys. I was watching the 12 Monkeys TV series. which, yeah, I ended up liking, and that's long since passed. Next up, Kat wanted to talk about Parks and Recreation, and I think it was as it was going into its final season.
Yes.
Parks and Recreation or something, and so we were talking a lot about. No, actually, no, it wasn't. I was going through a bunch of old podcasts that wasn't there yet, because at one point in our podcast we talked about kind of the end of Parks and Recreation and how they were like it took place a little bit in the future and stuff like that, and how that was kind of interesting. Maybe that was that one. I don't know. But anyways, Kat brought up Parks and Recreation, and so that's what we were talking about at the time. And then you came up last, and your pick was Kill La Kill, the anime.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because, like, I didn't even watch that much of it. I probably watched, like, the first couple episodes of that. I need to get back to that at some point.
It was funny because when I was listening to the first podcast again, and you were talking about Kill la Kill, you said, I've just decided that I need to get back into anime.
I say that a lot. Yeah, that's a running theme. And then I never seem to do it because I never seem to, like, make time for it.
Yeah. I think you'd only watched, like, the first 2 or 3 episodes when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think you just pretty much stopped after that.
Also, I think I brought it up just because, like, I didn't know, like, exactly like what to bring up. It's one of those things. It's growing pains. It's kind of like,
Yeah, you didn't know what else to talk about, so you're like, oh, this is something I'm watching, and I think that was the last episode you watched were before that we discussed that.
yeah, exactly.
So that was what we talked about in our first podcast. I just thought that was kind of funny to kind of go back, and it's also funny because that was, man, Kat's audio quality was so bad.
I remember you were going off about that at the time too. You're like,
well, you needed to do
like,
something. Like there are parts you just could not understand a word she was saying, you know?
Right.
She was using it was just like the microphone built into her like laptop, I think, and it just was not working. And I think you were using a webcam which had its own microphone.
Was I using a web? I thought I was using a headset. I might not have been.
I don't know. I don't know for sure. We've gone through a number of audio devices.
Because I feel like I had a headset by that point because I was doing gaming with headset. I don't know.
I think I was using a webcam at the time, and then I ended up switching over to like a standalone microphone, but I would think that when we first started, I was using a webcam, but it had a decent microphone on it. But yeah, Kat's was like really muffled. It was hard to hear. Even like listening back, I'm like, wow, I'm having trouble making out what she's saying. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. I think we ended up getting her a microphone, like a cheap microphone, and it improved a little bit, but it still wasn't great, but it was audible improvement.
Well, now I've massively upgraded myself. I got myself a Blue Yeti. Mm-hmm. It's very nice. Yeah. It has much better audio quality than anything else I used before on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, like we both have like good microphones now and stuff, so the quality is like much better. It's interesting also because I think when we first started, I used to have to edit it we would record all of our audio separately.
Yes.
And we had to like clap we had to do like a count of 3 and then clap, so I could line up the audio.
Oh,
and
that's
so
right.
The audio was like straight sourced from the computer, so there was no like lag or glitches from the stream, which we get now sometimes.
Well,
not that often, but
that was another problem. It's just like figuring out a way to do this because we're not in the same room.
Yeah,
and finding software that like I said, the whole clapping thing was because the solution for a long time was just to record our audio separately on each end using audio recording software, like on my end and your end, and then you would have me send my audio to you, and you would edit the audio together. Which would not an ideal setup.
Yeah, it takes a long time. It's a lot of work, and it was a lot of like there's a lot of like room for error, like there's a lot of steps along the path where like, maybe somebody exported their audio and their computer crashed, so then their audio's lost. So then it was like, okay, so we have like 2 sides of the 3 audio tracks now. And so we have to, I remember, I think one podcast, I literally was like amplifying, like you could hear kind of faintly in the background of somebody else's track, somebody's audio. And I was like amplifying that so we could get their audio in, because otherwise you couldn't hear them at all, like because they had lost their audio track. I can't remember who it was, but there were some issues with that. We ended up moving to a much easier solution. It's like a little bit less professional in the editing process, but it just was so much easier to actually get done. And that was, we were using Hangouts on Air. from Google, and they would just straight export the audio as like a YouTube file, and I could just download that and then rip the audio and edit it all there. And then that went away, and that's what we're doing right now is we use Zoom.
Yeah, we're using Zoom. Zoom works now for what we need.
Yeah, it works pretty clean. Like the one benefit, there was one big benefit of having the separate audio tracks, and that was that like if we talked over each other or something, I could like edit out one side of it, and or maybe even like time shift it a little bit so that I could put somebody like so they both talk but not at the same time, you know? So I used to have more freedom to do kind of stuff like that in editing, but it was so much more work that I would literally be like editing a podcast for like 12 plus hours, you know? It was too much.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I don't know how you put up with it. You are a champ for doing that as long as you're doing that. That's dedication.
Right now with Zoom, I think we're getting probably the best audio quality. We don't really get that many glitches anymore or anything.
No,
we used to get a lot of them.
Yes, we used to get a lot of them, a lot of dropouts. I haven't had that happen too often recently.
Yeah, even when we get them, it's usually on somebody's end, but the actual audio we get out of it ends up being okay. So it's like even when we get to the editing process, we usually just leave like a gap of a little moment of silence where I can like see it in the waveform. I can go, okay, there's where that happened, and then edit it really quickly. But it's usually not that big of a deal. Like usually it's just kind of, I'm editing out our ums and ahs and stuff instead. Or filler words. But yeah, that's kind of like a little history of like how we edit this podcast and how we do everything on that. Let's get into our main topic of this podcast, which is we put together, and we did this last night, we put together our top 10 series finales, like a list, because we're like, this is our series finale. Let's talk about our favorite series finales. This is actually kind of hard because we wanted to pick ones that we'd both seen. So there's like, so we could only pick ones that were in our overlap.
Right. So this is out of ones that we both watched. This is not supposed to be like a definitive list of best series finales ever. If your favorite show, your favorite series finale is not mentioned, that just means that we probably haven't watched it, or we just have a different opinion.
Or one of us watched it and the other one hasn't, so we couldn't include it, or like there's so many different variables.
This is not supposed to be some definitive list.
Yeah, definitely.
So please don't take it like that.
This is just kind of, a lot of these are ones we talked about on this podcast. Ones that we covered the show. And that's, in some of the cases, I think that might be why they rank high on the list, is because it was like an actual discussion we had together about it, and that cemented it as being more important to us. So that's another factor in how this list was put together. So let's start things off. Number 10, Daredevil series finale. I believe it ran for 3 seasons, right?
Yes, 3 seasons and no movies so far. It's 3 seasons. It was a sweet 3 seasons because the show was consistently high quality. In my
except
opinion,
for the hand stuff.
Yeah, like it's weird. That season's weird because the hand stuff sucks, but everything.
All the hand stuff on the Netflix shows sucked. All the Netflix shows that had hand stuff sucked.
Everything involving the hand sucked, but everything involving the Punisher was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. That was the season 2 dilemma, you know? Like the first part was like really good, and then it got into the hand stuff and it was like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
So the 3rd season of Daredevil focused on what was that, the character's name? Bullseye, was it? Or
yeah, Bullseye was the new character that was introduced in season 3.
And it put a strength and focus also on Fisk.
Yes, it brought Fisk back, and it brought the focus back on him. Like, by bringing Fisk back and stuff, it's almost as if it was intentionally being crafted as an ending. So basically, that the entire season was like Fisk was supposed to be in custody, but he was manipulating everybody around him to reassert control over his crime empire in New York. And it was basically about Daredevil trying to stop him, but Daredevil has a problem, because when the show starts, because of the Defenders, like everybody thinks Matt Murdock's dead at the beginning of the season. Anyway, it culminates into a great series finale in which we have a pretty epic showdown between Daredevil, Bullseye, and Kingpin, where, Daredevil, seemingly defeats Kingpin for good, and also Bullseye. And then we get this ending where it seems like it seems like a happy ending, right?
Mhm.
Because everybody's like found peace and stuff, and like people know about Matt's identity.
There was
But-
all this kind of frustrating drama between the three
Yes.
people in the law firm, and they kind of like got rid of it finally.
Yeah, they got rid of it at the end, and but there is that stinger, because there's a stinger with Bullseye where he's getting like surgery done on his back because his back was broken during the fight. He's getting like surgery, and it looks like they're enhancing him, making him stronger. And you just see, like, I think the last shot is like we're looking at the underside of the surgery table, and we see Bullseye, he opens his eyes, and then it ends. So yeah. It's a thing here where, like, okay, Daredevil season 3, that was the series finale. It wasn't intended to be a series finale because clearly they intended for there to be a season 4, but the show got canceled by Netflix. And this is what happens with TV shows sometimes, in which a series finale isn't always intended or written to be a series finale.
Yeah. Let's go to our next one on our list. So at number 9, Lost. Lost is going to be a controversial pick for some people.
Yeah, unlike Daredevil, this was very much intentionally a series finale. This was Lost got to end on its own terms, which is fantastic because it's a great show.
That was pretty groundbreaking for its time. There was a whole deal about how in season 3 they were like treading water. So the beginning half of season 3 that a lot of people don't like, a lot of the reason why it's so bad is because they literally were trying to end the show and the network wouldn't let them. Right, and so they were in negotiations about how they could eventually end the show, and they actually got the right to do it. And that was like unheard of in broadcast TV. Like nobody did that in broadcast TV. It was like, you want to end a show, but it's successful. Why would you end it? You just go on forever, until it's not successful anymore.
Right. Until we stop making money from it.
Exactly. So this was like a big deal that they wanted to end the show. And so we were able to get an ending on the terms of the creators of the show. A lot of fans weren't happy with the way it turned out.
So this, because this was not the ending like people envisioned for the show. And I fully understand the complaints. In fact, I wasn't super impressed with the finale the first time I watched it. I remember my feelings about that. I was kind of like, I guess I got kind of married to an
idea of what was supposed to happen.
Yeah. Well, the last season, they introduced like Flash Sideways. So if you're not familiar with Lost, one of the main things of Lost is for the first couple seasons, they have flashbacks that explain in depth and detail the backstories of these characters that we're following so that you can get to know them better. And then at some point, like around season 4, they subvert that and they change it to flash forwards, where we see them in the future. And then for the final season, they had one more trick up their sleeve. They did like Flash Sideways, where we saw like these events happening in the past, but they're not the same events that we had come to know before. These are things like characters, like everything is completely different.
Yeah, like Desmond's like a successful businessman and kind of, like things are like different, like Locke is a teacher, there's all these like different kind of directions that people have taken their lives. And so the original idea that people had in their heads was like, oh, this is like alternate reality.
Right. That's why I said we're doing parallel realities. We're doing parallel universes. And then I think when the finale came and the finale like said, oh, the Flash Sideways was the afterlife. This is all the afterlife. I was kind of like, oh, come on, that's lame. Why? But we did our rewatch last year of Lost, and even before that, like over time, I've come to warm up to this finale. I came to warm up to the idea of the afterlife because when you think about it, and we talked about this when we discussed the episode of our rewatch, the episode really meant to be like a celebration of Lost, a celebration of like everything that came before. It's not supposed to be making some grand statement. It's supposed to like, it's like, here's the journey that we've taken. It was such an incredible journey. Let's just celebrate that.
Yeah, I mean, for the majority, it was just honoring the characters.
Yes.
And so it was really focusing on the character story, and the character story in Lost is phenomenal.
Yes.
It's like second to none, And just the way, I mean, I got very emotional watching it the first time, even though it wasn't kind of going in the way I had anticipated it would. It was going more in the faith direction than the science direction, where that was like the direct contrast in Lost was always like kind of science and faith.
Yeah. And then it went in the faith direction in the end. So Locke won in the end.
Yes. But yeah, it kind of went more in the faith direction where I was more favorable to the science direction. But it's just the emotional storytelling that they were able to do. The emotional payoffs of that story is what really made it work for me. I mean, there's some issues here and there in the finale and just kind of like certain kind of like light, weak plot points and stuff that kind of happen. But like that, the character story was so good that the way it came together by the end was like an emotional wall-up.
The big payoff is when Jack meets his father and his father, what Jack's father tells to Jack, you know, and then that's like the big payoff.
That these are the most important people in your life, and those are the people that you wait for in the afterlife in order to move on together. And so that was like just a kind of beautiful moment. So
yes, that
ended up making the Lost finale really strong for me, at least. I know some people are going to hate it and they don't like it and stuff.
I saw a list yesterday that had the finale on a list of worst TV finales.
That same list put The Sopranos ending on best TV finales.
Yeah.
So I part ways with them completely there.
Oh, that you have words about the Sopranos finale. Yeah.
So let's move on to number 8. Number 8 is a comedy series, the first comedy on our list, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yes. That was a fun finale.
Alive, damn it.
Yeah. That was a very fun finale. They did a good job of. It's interesting because it takes the structure of a regular episode, but also like kind of wraps up these characters' stories as well within that.
We're talking about the last episode of the series itself, not the special. There's an interactive special that came out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, we're not talking about the special. Special's kind of weird following this. But anyway, yeah, we're talking about the series itself. Basically, episode, like, all the usual hijinks are happening, you know, like Titus gets a job as an understudy on The Lion King, but at the same time, Mikey's having his wedding to another guy, and Titus gets the idea that he's going to show up and embarrass Mikey at the wedding, and then Mikey would run off with him because that's what Mikey wants him to do, and then that turns out to actually be the case. But Titus is like, got a commitment to do The Lion King. Then, there's a whole plot about they're going to blow up the boathouse, and Lillian wants to be blown up inside of it so that she can become a ghost and haunt New York. Kimmy is trying to raise money any way she can to stop the boathouse from being blown up. And Jillian is she's like having a conflict with the actor who played Siler on Heroes, whose name I can't remember all of a sudden. Zachary Quinto.
Yeah.
Yes. With Zachary Quinto's character, they're kind of having like a back and forth, like rivalry turned love interest thing. So it's the usual hijinks, but then it kind of like ends up to like with everybody finding their purpose or finding their place. Like at the end of it, like we fast forward like 4 years. So from the date that aired, so it's 2024, and we see that Titus is a successful film actor. I love it because like he's on the red carpet for his movie. It's Sliding Doors 2, Tokyo Doors. Yeah. Anybody remembers that Gwyneth Paltrow movie, Sliding Doors? Yeah. And Jillian, she has like a successful talent agency with Zachary Quinto. Lillian is now an announcer or something for like the New York subway system, and she's like happier than ever. And Kimmy is at the grand opening of an amusement park in Orlando based on her book Grebulex. And I thought, so everybody gets a nice conclusion, and I just thought that was fun.
Yeah, that's kind of the Tina Fey way. Like Tina Fey will like hit on some hard topics, but always kind of in a very like oddly cheerful and light way, you know? And the characters always kind of come to these endings that are very like happy but not ordinary.
Right.
So that was a good finale. Next up on number 7 of our top 10 finales is Angel,
which is funny because like I hated this for a long time because of the ending. But again, it was another thing where the more I thought about it, the more I came around to it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like So I gotta tell you, the reason I hate this, and then the reason I don't anymore, and the reason I hated it was because the entire series, they kept talking about, like, there was this prophecy that there's going to be, like, this epic war with, like, the demons invading Earth, and only, like, the Chosen could stop it, and Angel was part of that prophecy. And so, like, one of the main villains in the series was this law firm, Wolfram and Hart, or, like, an evil law firm.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to bring about this prophecy. They're trying to bring about the demon apocalypse.
Well, that was the whole last season was weird because they, like, went to work in Wolfram and Hart.
Yeah, they kind of flipped everything on its head because, yeah, the last season had the Angel team actually working for Wolfram and Hart. With, like, Angel kind of telling himself, like, that they were there to just sabotage them from within.
Yeah, they could, like, mitigate the damage that the law firm would do while at the same time using the resources of the law firm to try to do more good than they could as just, like, street level heroes,
heroes. And so the episode ended with, like, basically this prophecy, this war starting, because, like, the gates open and the demons start pouring out. And then we see, like, Angel and the team, like, they're bracing themselves, and Angel says, like, oh, I'll take the dragon, right? And then it ends forever. And I'm like, no, I want to see that. Why?
See, this is another case of this, that wasn't they didn't know that they were ending. The last scene, the very last scenes of this episode was when they knew that they had to end it. And they couldn't make another episode. They couldn't make another season. They had to end it all with just this, like, last scenes. And so they ended it with the idea of, like, the fight carries on kind of thing.
Right. And like I said, the more I thought about it, or the more I came around to it, that it's not so much about the actual fight. It's about the idea that what Angel's doing, fighting against evil and stuff, is a never-ending battle. And that was kind of like, it was always going to end either in that or in, like, Angel's death or something.
We end with all of our characters recommitting to tilting at windmills.
Yeah, exactly. So in that respect, it's actually a very good, and it's actually a very fitting ending for the series. Mm-hmm. I think anything else probably would have just been disappointing when you think about it.
Yeah, if you have too much resolution, sometimes it takes away from the impact of it. Like if things end, then it's like, well, then they don't carry on in your mind, then it really is, like, closed. But, like, the way it ends there, it, like, leaves room in your mind to imagine that the fight's still going on, that they're still fighting, that they're still having these adventures.
Right, yeah, exactly. And I think in that respect, it's very effective. So I actually appreciate it now.
So our next one on our list at number 6 is a mini-series, The Plot Against America. So it's a mini-series, so this wasn't an issue of it being canceled or anything like that. This is, like, plotted from beginning to end as a single story.
Yeah, so it's a mini-series. Quick summary of what it's about. It's basically about an alternate timeline in the 40s where Roosevelt Franklin Delano loses his bid for re-election to aviation Lindbergh, aviation star Lindbergh.
Yes, people know about the Lindbergh baby. If you've heard of that, that was the
Charles
father.
Lindbergh.
Yes,
yeah, Charles Lindbergh, who becomes president on the Republican ticket, and he becomes a fascist president. He campaigns on a platform of anti-war, of not getting involved in the war in Europe, and he seems to be very sympathetic to the Nazis. In the series, like, as this is happening on the national scale, the series, like, zeroes in on a Jewish family in New Jersey and how the events that are happening are directly affecting this family. In particular, and it's harrowing. It's harrowing. It's scary. And the final episode kind of comes up. There's a point, like, where Charles Lindbergh is actually assassinated, and his vice president takes over office, and
he starts acting much more aggressively, like, out of fear.
Yes. Yeah, he starts acting much more aggressively. He really ratchets things up. So by this point, things are insane. And so we get to the conclusion of the series. The series concludes where they're holding a new election, and Roosevelt once again is running, presumably against the vice president for election. And And basically, like, it ends with everybody's like waiting with bated breath to get the election results. And then we see these shots of like people, they're going into like ballot offices, they're pulling like boxes of ballots. We see like men pulling ballots out of boxes and like burning them or throwing them in a river or something.
What's distressing about that is we don't know how those people are aligned either.
Right. So we know through the series, that there were British agents working to basically undermine Lindbergh's presidency and to basically try and restore what they thought was, American democracy to the country. Because basically with Lindbergh in charge, they saw the United States as an enemy.
Yeah, sliding into fascism.
But then we also know that there are a lot of people, white supremacists, who are sympathetic to Lindbergh and that movement. So the people we see in these shots who are messing with the ballots, we don't know if they're the British agents trying to, underhandedly get Roosevelt elected, or if they're the white supremacists trying to make sure that the vice president remains president.
Yes.
So the last shot is like they're listening on the radio and they're going to announce who won the election. And then before it's said, it just cuts and you don't know. You don't know who's announced as the winner. So it kind of leaves you, it ends on a very melancholy tone where you don't know, like, if things ended up for the better or if they ended up for the worse.
And also, if they end up for the better, did they end up for the better in the right way? Or did they end up for the worst from, the right way, Like, you don't know how things ended up playing out there. So it's a really kind of conflicted kind of thing to take in, because on one hand, it's like, if those are if those people are burning ballots to keep somebody like Lindbergh from being in power again, then in a way that's good because it keeps that person from being in power, but in another way it undermines democracy.
You're right, it undermines democracy.
So they mirror this with the family too, because kind of our last moments with the family, everyone's kind of together and there's this sense of they're happy and they're eating together and they're having this thing, but there's like just behind the frame, like animosity that you can see between a lot of the characters in this family now.
Oh yeah.
It's like, so it's like things like look better, but are they kind of,
are they better? Like, and that's the big question. And I thought this is also notable because this episode aired during an election year where the fears that family were feeling were also felt very really in real life.
Yes.
As we got closer and closer to the election, there was a lot of fear that, was Donald Trump going to remain president and were things just going to continue to deteriorate or, get worse? Were we going to elect Joe Biden and kind of, try to make things better?
Yeah. And like, how would that happen in either way? It's like, yeah, it was a very like timely series. Like, so this was based on a book that had been out for quite a while before this. I believe by Philip Roth. I'm not sure. But the adaptation of this as a series on HBO was from David Simon, who also did like The Wire. He's a very politically active writer.
Oh yeah. And the adaptation was very much a response to the Trump presidency,
Yes.
Very much so. I don't think it was intentionally written to coincide with election year specifically.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that people would look at and go like, oh, they're clearly referencing Trump here with this language. And it's like, no, that was literally Lindbergh's language in real life. Like back then, like the America First kind of sentiment and a lot of that kind of stuff was from that actual.
Well, I mean, like he's clearly making parallels to Trump.
Oh yeah, but it's almost more like he's bringing it out because there's parallels to Trump, rather than that he's creating parallels to Trump, because the parallels to Trump were already in the book before Trump even ran for president the first time. The parallels were in there in history, like the things that people say, like certain phrasings and stuff are in legitimate history from that era, So it's almost more, it's less like he created parallels and more that he like highlighted parallels. So it was a really interesting series for its time, especially to have something be that timely and that like evocative in that moment.
Yeah. So I thought it was a great finale. Again, another finale. Not all, and just goes to show, like, not all finales offer closure or have to offer closure to be a good finale. certainly with this finale, there wasn't closure. The dread persisted even after the final frame.
Yes.
Simply because you didn't know the outcome. And there was the insinuation that maybe like things were being fixed so that the outcome that, you as a viewer, that we wanted as viewers was not going to happen.
Yes, and it, again, that paralleled what was happening in our real world in that real moment, And so it kind of mixed in with our own, like, real-world anxieties.
I think at the time, like, I said, like, I felt like it was too cynical for an ending, but, it works.
Yeah, definitely. Our next show is, it's kind of an anthology series, so this finale is actually just the finale of its second and final season. And this was a show that probably was supposed to have a third season, but it just didn't end up happening. But it doesn't matter because it's like an anthology series. Everything still had kind of a nice wrap up like a finale should. And that is American Vandal. And we're talking about the last episode of season 2, which is the last episode of the series. And American Vandal, for anybody who doesn't know, and each season, like I said, is kind of its own thing. It's kind of a spoof of like true crime documentaries and stuff, like documentary series, like, there's like the podcast Serial is like an example, or like the Netflix one, Making a Murderer, It's kind of like it kind of uses a lot of the tropes that are in that kind of true crime structure. And it's telling a much more like ridiculous story. Like in the first season, it's like about spray painted penises on cars, at like a high school. And the second season is this kind of gross story about basically giving all these people laxatives so that they shit all over everything.
So a lot of poop jokes.
Yeah. So it kind of starts off in this kind of gross parody, kind of stupid way. But what happens in both seasons is as they progress, the actual like kind of comedy aspects of it start to kind of give way to like an actual real issue that's behind what's happening. And then that plays out in a way with like a real like emotional resolve. And that's what ends up happening in American Vandal's second season. What started out as a bunch of poop jokes ended up turning into a story about doxing, about like basically all of the kids in the school being doxed, about all of their private secrets being released, and about what that kind of means and how people kind of treat each other and stuff. And that's what's so impressive about this series as a whole, is how it goes from being comedy and transitions in like a seamless way where you don't even really notice it until it's already happened into something much more serious. And of course, it's never as serious as like an actual murder or something, but it's serious on a different level. It's a very emotional storytelling. I'm really sad we're actually not getting a third season.
Yeah, me too.
That was pretty crushing because both seasons were so good.
They were. That show was something else. That show was more than the sum of its parts. Because, like, there's a lot of juvenile humor, but, like, as you just explained, they can do, like, serious, dramatic moments.
Yeah.
It does go deeper than that at times, while still managing to keep the humor and keep things funny. And, and I'm sorry, like, people, like... Try not to do a pun. Try not to do a pun. People groan about poop jokes, but this brought poop jokes to an art.
What's also great is that this final episode was titled The Dump. And basically through the episode, everyone thought there was going to be another huge poop joke fiasco disaster that was going to be really bad. Like everybody thought like, oh, they're going to cause the sewage to erupt, or people are going to be on laxatives again. And you're going to be on that same situation you had at the very beginning of the season. But The Dump ended up being something very different. The Dump ended up being a huge compound of files on all of these people at the school that just kind of humiliated and exposed them, and that's what it ended up being about. That was The Dump. So everybody was preparing for this poop related thing to happen, and then instead you get this thing that's much worse, because it's like actually like a kid was outed, like there's somebody that was like just really lonely, like and was exposed for and shown how he was tricked, and it's just people were blackmailed. There's a lot of stuff going on that was really kind of horrific in a much worse way than just like a poop incident,
Right.
And that's the strength of American Vandal. And that last episode was just something else, you know? Like, we already knew what American Vandal was because we'd seen the first season. So I already knew to expect that it would turn into something deeper, but like it still hit like a gut punch, you know, when that switch up happened.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was like oof. So that was a great finale.
Yeah, highly recommend anybody to watch American Vandal. It's a great show that I think not nearly enough people have seen. The next one on our list is also a great series that not nearly enough people have seen, and that is The Magicians. It's a show on Sci-Fi. This was one of the early shows that we would talk about on our podcast. We talked about the first episode, like, oh God, so long ago, very early in our podcast. We talked about this first episode of The Magicians, and it became like a staple of our podcast where every season we would cover the show episode by episode.
Yes.
It very much follows like the Buffy, Angel, kind of Joss Whedon-esque kind of mold of shows.
Yeah, it's
kind
very
of like funny, but also dramatic and, you know, a little bit angsty and stuff. And that's kind of what The Magicians kind of fit into. But man, like, as that show picked up, it went on really strong. My sister actually just recently finished this. She was like 2 seasons behind, and she just like watched through those 2 seasons just recently. And we were just talking about it like this last weekend about like the smart things that were done this season. And some of it was stuff we talked about on this podcast already when those episodes were airing, like the fact that, you know, the main character of the series died the season before, yet they found a way to like make him like his presence was felt throughout the last season. Like, it was strongly felt even though he was never there. Like, the actor was never filmed anything for the season, was never there for any of it, but like they still found a way to like make it feel like there was a, you know, a Quentin shaped hole in the entire season, you know, that everything kind of was coming from. Like, everything was it was kind of rotating or orbiting that Quentin shaped hole. And,
right.
And it's just a really smart way of handling an actor leaving and then still having to do another season. But in addition to that, it's just the way they ended up bringing things to an end in the finale.
Yes. Like, they create an entirely new world with the world seed.
Yes.
Right? It's another one of those finales that we have that ends the show, but also like hints at more. Like,
there's more adventures to come.
There's more adventures to come. The Magicians was another show that it was canceled. It was canceled at season 5. It was not planned to end here originally. I do believe they did plan on a season 6, but Sci-Fi canceled it unexpectedly during the 5th season.
Yeah. And so they had to wrap things up at the last minute.
Yeah, they had to wrap things up at the last minute. And I love it because, like, I had to look up the quote, but I love it because what Margot says in the last scene is perfect for, like, where the situation that happened. Because Margot says, you know, you guys know our lives are about to get even weirder in some insane way that we can't possibly predict. And I can't think of, like, a better line to end a series on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because what's important here is that I think The Magicians was very heavily based on the character faults of the characters, like the areas where the characters are held back. And because the whole idea of the series is that magic comes from pain. And so the idea is that these characters, they have these tragic character faults in them that lead to them, you know, self-sabotaging and causing themselves problems. But that's also kind of the origin of the magic. And so while they didn't resolve these characters' fates entirely, what they did resolve is their character traits, the things that drive them, that cause them to be self-destructive. Those do have kind of closure. They kind of went through systematically. You know, Elliot started going out with somebody that's nice, you know, is a good example. Margot stopped being a jerk to Elliot's wife. I can't remember her name. His forced marriage from Fillory, you know,
right.
Started being nice to her. It's like Alice kind of stopped being like, you know, it's just all of these character deficits that they had, they kind of like resolved their own things. And it doesn't mean that they perfectly resolved them, but it's that they moved on from this, like, it's they evolved as characters, you know? And at that point, it's like, if they did another season, those characters would be in such a different place that it wouldn't feel like The Magicians anymore. And so in that sense, it feels really good as a series finale, you know, because not only do you have that feeling similar to like Angel of like the fight carries on, or like, you know, we need to keep going, but in addition to that, you also have these like resolution of all of these traits for these characters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, great finale. Next one up up is one of our favorite shows that we both talk about endlessly every chance we get. I've actually been rewatching this series recently because another podcast I listen to has finally started watching it. So I've been watching 1 week at a time, keeping up with them.
Oh, nice.
Because it's fun to just kind of revisit it like that. And that's Hannibal. And so Hannibal, again, another example of a show that was not supposed to end on its season 3 finale. And what's crazy is that there's like a post-credits scene in this episode, and if you take that post-credit scene out, it's like a perfect series finale.
Yeah.
Things resolved exactly as they should.
It's like there's a post-credit scene, but I wish there wasn't.
Yeah. And it's not that the post-credit scene is bad, it's just that that's the thing that makes you go like, oh, now I want season 4, you know?
Right, exactly.
Like everything had closure before that.
Closure, yeah. The final scene of the series is so beautiful because it's Will and Hannibal embracing. They're going off a cliff outside of, I believe, Hannibal's home. And, it's poetic.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And it doesn't how do you end it any better than that?
It's just the way they did, because it isn't just that they went off the cliff. It's like when they went off the cliff, when Hannibal realizes that Will has pushed him off this cliff and they're going off this cliff together, he's not even upset. It's more just like, of course. Yeah, and it's like acceptance and stuff. And like that moment is so beautiful. And like the music, they got a new track from an old recording artist for that one, like they ended it really, really well. It's so great, the ending to that. I don't want to go too much into it just because I think it's such a great series that not nearly enough people watched. And I think it will shock people that haven't watched it when they'll see it. They'll go, what the fuck? This was on NBC? That's like the first reaction that almost everybody I introduced this show to. They're like, this wasn't on HBO? Like, that's like they just assume like, oh, this is like an HBO show. What do you mean this was on NBC? This doesn't make sense, And it's like, yeah, this was like an amazing show, like way above what NBC would ever make. And unfortunately, they canceled it after 3 seasons. But that season 3 finale was beautiful.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love it. Like, I don't know. They could do 5 more seasons. I don't know if they could come up with ending as perfect as that.
Yeah, I don't know if they could come up with a better ending than that. But then again, I mean, season 2 finale too, Hannibal has done some amazing season finales.
Yeah, season 2 finale was amazing. I would not. God, like
it wasn't closure amazing. It
wasn't closure amazing. Yeah, it was amazing in a different way. I want to say it's not series finale amazing. But it was amazing for season finale.
Yeah, so it's like who knows? It's like we say I don't know if there's a better way for it to do it, but I mean, hey, and Brian Fuller, I trust.
Yep, exactly. Bring us more, and then then we can curse this list for us not actually having a series finale on this list.
Yeah. So for number 2, and this was a year in which the number 2 and number 1 season finales on our list both came out in the same year.
Actually,
as did The Magicians.
Yeah, I was going to say number 4 was also the same year. This was the year that everything we had been following on the podcast for a while decided to abruptly end at the same time. Pretty much. Yeah.
And so number 2 is Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot is crazy in connection to our site because I got a screener for the first episode of Mr. Robot.
Was that the first screener you got?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
it was like, I don't know, 2 months before the season, before the show premiered, I got this screener and I watched it. And this is the first episode. And I was like, oh my God, this might be one of the best TV shows I've ever seen just from the pilot. I'm like, this is Fight Club with hackers. This is like amazing. And I wrote this glowing review of the screener, like going on and on about how much I loved it and how great it was. It was one of my proudest works, like reviewing something. And then immediately as I went to post it, our site went down for like a month. By the time our site was up and operational again and I could post it, the screener was out. And like there were all these articles about how amazing it was had come out like since then, I'm like, God damn it.
I remember you telling me about that at the time. Yeah. It's like, oh, that could have been your big break.
Yeah, that could have been the one that kind of got us attention because people were interested in that show. And there wasn't a lot about that episode yet. There were like a few because it had also, they screened it at South by Southwest, and there were a few articles about that were floating around, but like there weren't that many, you know, and I would have been one of the early ones in on that. And so that would have been kind of really cool. It also would have gotten me, I think, a better connection with the show itself, with the PR agents that I was in contact with, if I had been able to get that out. And that would have also maybe gotten us some interviews and other stuff. So it was just a bad situation all around for me, but it was a great show.
Yeah,
and
it was a great show.
It's something we discussed, you know, whenever there was a new season on, we discussed it week to week. It was a feature of our podcast. And the final season, man, they just like basically, Sam Esmail just basically decided, okay, so this is my final season of Mr. I'm just going to make a reel.
Yeah.
I'm just going to show every kind of way that I can direct. I'm going to do a rom-com with an airport scene. I'm going to do a silent movie where there's no dialogue. I'm going to do,
and he could get away with that because like the entire episode literally took place in Elliot's subconscious.
It was like a 6-act play was one of them. He just like everything. He just kind of decided to go all out stylistically, and in the end, we had, similar to Lost, I guess, we had this thing where we thought like, oh, maybe he's jumped to a different dimension. But instead of being in the afterlife like it ended up being with Lost, what ended up being with Mr. Robot was it ended up being like within his own consciousness or his subconsciousness.
Right.
And we got to learn that the Elliot we'd been following this whole time was a construct Elliot.
Right, yeah. So we were never really following the real Elliot.
Yeah, we were following the personality because we knew Elliot had multiple personalities. We were following the personality that Elliot built to protect himself.
Yes. So early in the season, we got the hint that there wasn't just Mr. Robot and Elliot. There was a third personality, and it was a big mystery throughout through the entire season. And the finale revealed that to be the third personality was the person we were following the whole time. It was Elliot, the mastermind.
Yes.
And the real Elliot was the third personality that we were not seeing in the show.
Yeah, it was a brilliant ending.
Right.
It was convoluted as fuck, but like in the best of ways.
Yes.
It was convoluted without a single negative connotation. It's amazing how that series was still surprising.
And the end, you know, when Mastermind is confronted with the fact that he's not the real Elliot, because he doesn't even know. Like, that's the big thing. He's not even aware that he's not the real Elliot. And when he's confronted with that, and then when he's forced to make a choice to, you know, relinquish control or try to hold on to it, and the series ends with the Mastermind, you know, giving up control and Elliot waking up for the first time in ages. I thought that's a great ending.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was brilliant. It was emotional. It was sad. It was hopeful. It was everything. And like I said, it was convoluted as fuck, but in the best of ways.
In one of the best of ways. Yeah, exactly.
and it managed to be a surprise all the way through that series. That series had so many surprises. It's amazing how they were able to pull them off so consistently. But yeah, ended on a really strong surprise. The character we knew all along was actually just a construct. So that's number 2. Now that brings us to the number 1 entry on our list, our favorite series finale. And again, I want to remind, because there's probably some people going, I know what this is, that are completely wrong. As part of this list, we're only picking ones that we've both watched. So there's there's going to be some stuff that slips out there. There's going to be stuff that neither of us have watched. And there's going to be some stuff that one of us watched that the other one hasn't or something. And we're going to get to some of those. We're going to have some kind of honorable mentions after this. But our number 1 pick is The Good Place.
Yes. I mean, we raved enough about this on this podcast, right? Like,
I can sum it up in 5 words.
Yeah,
I cried
ahead.
like a bitch.
Yes. I bawled my eyes out at that last scene. I mean, what else is there? It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
You take a comedy about the afterlife, you turn it into a comedy about ethics. How do you make a comedy about ethics? And then you end that show as like a dramedy about ethics. You end it in such a sad and melancholy way. Such a, the entire last episode was really a rumination on dying and, and kind of like accepting death. it's like beyond that, it's like accepting death from death, accepting like a final end, like no heaven, no afterlife.
Finale,
nothing.
I mean, the whole concept was there in the afterlife, but it was basically accepting that human experience has to cease at some point.
Yeah.
And kind of like, and coming around to accepting that and not being afraid of it. That was, I think, the final lesson of The Good Place. And the way they chose to depict that in like their version of the afterlife, where they have like this door that you can go through any time if you just feel like you want to stop living. It was kind of controversial. I remember some people weren't happy about that. But I think the idea was like accepting death and being having a sense of inner peace about it. We see like throughout the finale, we see multiple characters that we love. Just they go through the door, they decide it's time because they come to feel that inner peace.
They pose the question like, okay, so you have an afterlife, no disease, no pain. You can spend time with everybody that you love for eternity. You can better yourself. You can do all these things. At what point does eternity become a punishment?
Right,
you have all of these things. Everything's great. At what point does that become a detriment? And they did that throughout the season. They were showing how heaven wasn't exactly, because I mean, they weren't in heaven through the whole series. They ended up in heaven.
Well, I got to tell you something. I am afraid of death. The concept of eternal nothingness is frightening to me, but equally frightening is the concept of eternal existence. I can't square that either. I'm equally as frightened by that concept. Like the idea of existing in heaven for literally ever is not appealing to me at the same time. So it's kind of like, yeah.
Well, that's what the show depicts. The show says, okay, you have everything you've ever wanted. Now what?
Right.
And you get to the point where it's like, okay, you've learned every language you want to do. You've discovered the answer to every secret you've ever had. You've gone to the emotional conclusion of every relationship you've ever had. You've come to peace with every issue you've ever had. You've gotten your fill of every piece of entertainment you ever wanted. It's everything is there. You've eaten every kind of food that you can eat, that you've wanted to. All of your things are fulfilled, and then what? And that's what, like, before they build this door in heaven, when they arrive in heaven, which, like I said, the show doesn't take place in heaven before. It's actually like a new idea of hell, basically.
Yeah. It's a fake out at the end of the first season.
But then they get to the actual heaven, and like everyone there is like miserable.
Yeah.
And it's because it's eternity, like what are they going to do for eternity? And just the creation of the door, even without going through the door, it brings new hope to everybody there in the afterlife. And then, as it progresses, it starts showing you like, okay, these people have lived these eternities of like thousands of years, but now they've accomplished everything that they'd ever want.
Yeah. It gets to a point where they feel trapped.
Yeah, and it's like, and now's when you end, when you have to bring yourself to an end, and that's what the finale was all about. So the finale was about this door that brings you an ultimate end.
Yes, and we slowly, like I said, we slowly watch the characters that we follow through a show. Like most of them, some of them, stay behind, but most of them go through this door. Especially one of the most emotional for me was when Chidi went through the door and left, and that kind of left Eleanor an emotional wreck. That was very sad for her. But then like the episode ends finally when Eleanor decides to go through the door, decides she's ready. And when she goes through, because they go through the door, we know for a fact they end, but we don't know exactly what happens when anybody steps through the door, because they don't show it in any of the previous scenes. They don't directly show it. But when Eleanor steps through a door, they show her going through, and she becomes energy. And I guess like her energy is redistributed into the universe. It's almost like she's recycled, right? Or something. And I don't know. I think that concept is beautiful.
Would you ever think that a character saying "smell you later" as the last line on the show would make you burst out in tears?
No, I did. But it was perfect, though. It was perfect. Michael living happily as a human on Earth was an awesome ending for that character.
Yes. This is just a great series finale. Very emotional. I'm tearing up just talking about it.
Absolutely, man. They knocked it out of the park.
So
that whole show was special.
So we've gone through our list. I wanted to go over some honorable mentions. You had one, which was Mindhunter.
Yes, Mindhunter. It was so great, and I feel like it sucks because we need more.
Yeah, it would have been good to see it continue on, but David Fincher is a busy person.
He is.
My pick for my honorable mention is The Leftovers. There was another one I was going to pick as well, but that's going to be covered soon after this, so hold on for that.
But, that's right, yes.
But my pick was The Leftovers. I think there's always been this kind of like storytelling advice that's been like show, don't tell, is like a thing. Leftovers kind of took the opposite approach at the very end, in which you have these two characters that had been through all of this, everything that happens in that series together for all of this time, and now they're much older and they've re-encountered each other, and one of them had disappeared for the longest time. And the idea was that, there was this big rapture-like event, and she had, transported herself to this other world. And we don't know if she ever did that or not. Like, that's not, like, it's all arguable. Like, I don't think she did. But it's all arguable whether or not she actually did go through this machine that basically killed her and would have sent her to this other world where everybody went off, or as they, some people believe that that's what this machine would do. It could have just killed people. But she goes through this device, and we don't know if she stopped it or not. But then she re-encounters the other lead in the series, and they're talking, and she basically tells him a story, and you don't see anything. It's nothing's visualized. It's just her telling him the story about how, all of these people disappeared from their lives. But as bad as you think it was for them to have these people disappear from their lives, imagine if those people that had disappeared, which was like a 10th of the population, I think, something like that, they would have lost so many more people. So imagine if like the world split in two, and a 10th of the population ended up in one version and the rest in the other. So you're in the one with the larger population, and you're like, oh my God, we lost a 10th of our population. How horrible is this? Imagine if you lost 9/10 of the population. Right. Like how horrible it would be. And so she's telling a story about how she encountered them, and she never went back. She had lost her whole family through this rapture-like event, and she went to see them, but they had moved on and they had found something. And so she found the scientist that created this machine that could send them back, and he created a machine that could send her back again to her own time, and she went there. But the whole thing is, it's all arguable, but the whole thing is perceived by many people, including me, to be like a lie, that she never went through with it, and this is just like a story she's created or something. And it's emotional, and it's such a brilliant moment, and it's just her telling a story. There's literally no visual cue. It's just her telling a story, and it's so powerful.
Right.
And it's hard to explain just like how good it is, like unless you've seen not just the scene, but the entire series. So that's going to be one of my picks there as a series finale honorable mention. The other one is represented here in we had some people that had been involved in this podcast in the past send in some audio to tell us about their favorite finales. And so let's play the first one right now. This is Ed and his favorite series finale.
Hello, Weekly Set fans. My name is Edward Boxler. I am a filmmaker, and I was a guest on this podcast a number of years ago. My favorite series finale of all time has to be Breaking Bad, and I will keep this vague and spoiler-free for anyone who has yet to watch this magnificent show. But basically, the whole beauty of this show to me was how it built tension. Something would be introduced, it would be like heavily escalated and then resolved, but always leading to some other conflict. And every season would build on the previous one up until the point where we get to season 5, particularly after the episode Ozymandias, which it is one of the only episodes of TV or anything on IMDb to have a perfect 10 score. But anyways, after Ozymandias, things have pretty much built up to a point of no return for Walter White. No matter how we felt about Walter, obviously the main character, about Jesse, about Skylar, Hank, and Walt Jr., there was always this hope for me that he would be able to one day realize the error of his ways and leave his entire meth empire behind. But Ozymandias, the events, what happened in that episode, pretty much solidified that was never going to happen. So the series finale, entitled Felina, resolved pretty much every single loose thread, plot point, even bringing back earlier characters. It basically encompassed in one of the most ingenious shootouts that provided catharsis for the audience, a pseudo-redemption for Walter, as well as pretty much the consequences that he deserved for his actions pretty much through the entire series. So basically, I cannot think of another series where the final episode left me so satisfied. Breaking Bad is one of my all-time favorite shows, and Felina is my all-time favorite series finale.
Okay, so that was Ed's pick. That was a season finale of Breaking Bad. I think a lot of people probably would just expect this to be my number one pick. If you checklist for like top series finales, it's almost universally at number one on so many of the lists, you know? And it was one that I'd considered on here. Will has not seen the whole entirety of Breaking Bad, though. It's something that I think he's held off for a rainy day.
Yeah.
He wants to like finish it eventually. So I'm not going to go into too many more details than Ed did about the series finale, only to say that, yeah, it is a brilliant finale. Ed was describing how everything was about like building tension and release. And to me, the whole series was about consequences and about like everything has a consequence, and that sometimes you can move past a point and you think like, oh, we got past this point, but there's still a consequence brewing somewhere and it's going to come back. And I think that that's what the series did so brilliantly well. And I think the finale kind of poetically brought some of that together. Like it said like, okay, these are the things you can't forget that you've built up to, and now we have to bring these back into play. And they did it in a really beautiful and kind of poetic way in the series finale. And so that was Ed's pick. Thank you, Ed, for sending us that audio. Next up, Lee, who has been on this podcast a number of times, was on for a while. She has sent in her pick for her favorite series finale, and we'll play that right now.
Hi, Tyson and Will. Congratulations on your 300th episode of the Weekly Set podcast show. My name is Lee Swift. Thanks for having me on again. I'm an actor from Toronto, and you can check me out in the season finale of The Handmaid's Tale. I'll be making a quick appearance in season 4, episode 10. My favorite pick for series finale is Marco Polo, and they gave us a bonus episode because the season got canceled abruptly based on one of the best characters in the show, 100 Eyes. I really love the bonus episode. I thought it was just great because it highlighted everything good about the show. It highlighted one of their best characters and just thoroughly enjoyed it. I would describe Marco Polo as a Asian Game of Thrones style type of show where it's about the travels of Marco Polo encountering Kublai Khan and all the drama that entails. Yeah, I thought it was really well done. I was very surprised that it was canceled, but I never caught on. That is my pick. If you want to just watch the bonus episode, it's a standalone episode, so you can definitely do that. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Lee. That was her pick. It was Marco Polo. It was a one-off episode that came after the series was canceled. I actually want to check that out because I watched some of Marco Polo, but I didn't stick with it. What Lee has described, Lee has described that this special episode is a standalone. So I'm kind of interested in checking that out because it kind of sounds like the more interesting parts of Marco Polo. Like, honestly, the thing I didn't like when I watched Marco Polo was Marco Polo. I liked all the characters around him more than I liked him, you know? And that kind of got me to kind of fall out of the series a little bit. But this other series, I don't think it has anything to do with Marco Polo at all. I think it has entirely to do with one of the side characters, and it's a complete disconnected story. So I'm going to actually check that out. So thank you, Lee, for bringing that one up and letting me know now that that is a kind of disconnected episode. So that means I can actually check that out. So
pretty sweet.
Looking forward to that. So there you go. That is Ed and Lee. They're both former contributors on this podcast. And thank you to both of them for contributing audio for our series finale. It was great having them back in for this kind of limited role right here. That's it. That's
all she wrote.
That's the end of it. All we have left to do is do what we do at the end of every one, which is to kind of talk about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks ahead. On Tuesday, May 4th, that's Star Wars Day. Star Wars The Bad Batch comes to Disney Plus, and the Selena series continues on Netflix. On Thursday, May 6th, Stuck With You comes to All Black, and Tomorrow the Entire World comes out. Girls 5 Eva comes to Peacock. That Damn Michael Che comes to HBO Fox. On Friday, May 7th, Mythic Quest returns on Apple TV Plus. Shrill on Hulu, Dynasty on the CW, Charmed on the CW, Girl from Nowhere on Netflix, Jupiter's Legacy, which I'm really looking forward to, comes to Netflix. On Saturday, May 8th, Mine to Netflix. On Wednesday, May 12th, The Upshaws to Netflix. On Thursday, May 13th, Castlevania returns for its final season on Netflix. Hacks comes to HBO Max, and Intergalactic debuts on Peacock. On Friday, May 14th, the Underground Railroad miniseries comes to Amazon Prime. That's getting a lot of kind of talk right now. I think it's supposed to be like an alternate history in which the Underground Railroad was like an actual train or something. So I don't know. There's a lot of talk about that series right now, so it'll be interesting to see what comes from that. Also, Alma Maters comes to Netflix. Halston, the miniseries, comes to Netflix. High School Musical, the series, comes to Disney+. Love, Death, and Robots Season 2 comes to Netflix. Move to Heaven to Netflix. And then on Sunday, May 16th, Good Witch comes to Hallmark. Death and Nightingales miniseries comes to Starz, and Run the World comes to Starz. So that's what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. We will not be back next week. We will not be back after those 2 weeks are up. Stay tuned to the launch of our next podcast, which right now is going to be called OnScreen. We still need to make sure that, that's not taken, that we have the rights to it and everything. But it's not a big deal. There's many podcasts with the same name. So it's pretty much probably what it's going to be called. As I said at the top of the podcast, if you're already kind of subscribed to the RSS feed through like a podcast client, or if you follow the YouTube channel to like get the videos, they're going to be in the same place. So don't worry about finding it if you're already listening. It'll just have a different name. That's pretty much it. But yeah, we're going to have a broader, tighter structure, a broader pool of topics, which is going to include not just TV, but also movies and video games. We're going to take some more kind of like interesting topics rather than just talking about whatever show we happen to be watching. We're going to, come up with ones where we're discussing interesting topics within TV and stuff. We're going to try to kind of do a few more interesting things. It's going to be a bit more structured with segments and stuff rather than just like a one topic per one or something. But yeah, that's going to be coming soon. You can find episodes of that and everything else we've done on thetotalscreen.com, our current podcast RSS feeds, through any podcast client you might be subscribed to, as I said, the YouTube channel. Yeah, just kind of stay attached to all of those, and you can keep up with us. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much. We absolutely appreciate it. 300 episodes. Woo!
And for the last time for this podcast, good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best